one of the big challenges in this room is it's not a traditional bonus room that goes straight back. So you've got a really fascinating challenge here where you've got a diagonal coming down here, a diagonal coming up there, where to have the size screen that the customer wanted, which is as big as you could do in this room, the projector's got to be far enough back to be able to have a really good throw on it. And so you'll see we've come right here, we've brought a chase. You'll see the orange pipe coming all the way from up front, and there's a bunch of calculations in it. I'll spare you the details, but essentially what you're calculating is, let's move as close as we can to get full size on the screen. Because we're offset, we've got to use a little bit of lens shift, and you want to use just enough lens shift to be able to get a great picture without getting keystoning and all of that. And it turns out we can get a good 12 inches of lens shift, which means we can move the projector a little bit to the right. That allows us to move it higher, but in any case, once you do all the mathematics of your throw distance, how far you can offset this way, and actually there's some offset as you move your way down from the top of the screen, you actually get a little bit more shift that you can do. So anyways, the chase is right here. That gives us full flexibility to put the projector right there, which is going to be terrific. Okay, so you can see right here where our rack's going to sit. We've got all the wires coming in, getting ready for the sheetrockers who will come in here. And you'll notice we've got this really advanced, basically black trash bag covering up the end of it. There's multiple ways to do this, but for right now, before anyone comes in so you don't get sheetrock on it or all sorts of other stuff that's about to happen, in the temporary, as soon as you pull the wires, just put a bag over them, get it covered up so everything's clean and ready. And so if you've watched some of our other videos online where we've done home theaters, one of the things you know is you constantly run into things that you don't expect. And so you'll see here, prior to us coming in the home, someone had already run, these are basically security cables in the telephone line, and you can see whoever did it did a terrible job. And so these lines actually need to go back up in the ceiling. I think there's a fun thing to point out for those of you that are either getting into the business or you're a do-it-yourselfer and you run into a situation like this. There's a handful of ways you can solve it, but if you think, one thing that might come to mind is you go, oh, well, I'll just cut it here and I'll put some extension in or whatever else. And the problem with that is you can't get then to where you cut it. So the real way to do this is actually to come down here all the way to the entrance. Cut the cables there. That will allow us to pull the cables back up, get them correctly placed into the roof, and then we can put a junction box down here so that you can always access where they were spliced. And so that's the proper way to do it, and I expect that'll be the game plan right here. Okay, so you saw in the pre-wire that this particular attic has got all sorts of roof angles all around it. So one of the greatest challenges was figuring out, one, how do we make it aesthetically beautiful? Two, how do we make it totally functional? So you've got a big screen, you've got great sound no matter what seat you're in. So first, let's just take a look at the room itself. Okay, so first let's focus on the video itself, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this screen. So you'll see we've got a pretty big screen in here, particularly given that the angles of the room itself sort of shrink and narrow as you go to the back of the room. So this is a 152-inch diagonal screen. It's actually a woven screen that's transparent so that the speakers, the left, center, and right, are actually directly behind it. And I'm going to show you later, we're actually going to go back behind the screen itself so you can see how we wired it, what it looks like behind the screen. Okay, so now let's talk about the surrounds, the Atmos, and the rear speakers. So in a room like this where you've got all of these angles, and you've got the seats, and you don't actually have a clear back, there's no natural place to put rear speakers, you have to get creative, and there were two ways to do this. And I'm going to walk you through sort of the concepts and then how we did it. So what we actually got set up here is 7 channels around, so we've got the 3 in the front, we've got the side speakers here, and we actually have rears that are about halfway down on the angled roof line so that they are lower than the Atmos, because you've got to get a height differential, and they're essentially angled in playing as the rears themselves. Then that leaves us with the Atmos just above the main seating position. So one of the things I want to show you here is how we did the actual grill cloth. And again, in a minute, we're going to go back behind the screen itself and see where the speakers are. But there's a subwoofer here and a subwoofer over there. So what we did was we actually took black speaker grill cloth, and there's a specific kind of grill cloth you want to use when you do this to make sure it's acoustically transparent, and we actually painted it to match the exact same paint as the woodwork itself, and you'll see it just looks gorgeous, but again has full playthrough. In all of the paint we did, it's matte colored, and if you go and look at the 7 mistakes we talk about people making in theaters, one of them is they use a gloss color or something like that right under a screen or somewhere else, or reflective paint everywhere. We used matte paint throughout to make sure we didn't pick up those reflections in the theater. Okay, so let's switch gears for a second and talk about the lighting in the room. And there's actually an entire video I did on this that talks about all the different lights that you would do, how to set them up correctly in a theater room. But let's just walk through this room itself. So first, you've got the sconces on the side. These are primarily for decorative reasons. And as you might imagine, when it's in movie mode, these come down. The next thing you'll see is what's considered task lighting. And so you'll see these canned lights. These are actually DMF lights, which Audiofice itself sells. They're high-end LEDs with a high CRI, which stands for Color Rendering Index, meaning they hold their color extremely well and can dim down really, really well. Getting dimming capabilities, you might imagine, is critical in a room like this because we want to be able to dim down and not have a lot of light reflecting on the screen. So if you come around here, you'll see we've got this front row of canned DMFs. We've got a middle row. And by the way, in this particular house, we actually have each of these on different circuits. There's literally 13 different lighting circuits in this room, which is way overkill. For those of you doing it yourself, you won't do that many. But whatever you do, make sure that your front lights are all on their own circuit so you can turn those off when you're watching a movie. The worst thing is having lights on everywhere or having to turn them all off. In this case, the customer can take their remote control and hit lighting scenes between movie scene, daytime scene, all sorts of scenes, and change all the lights in the room, maintain the aesthetic, but bring the lights up and down based upon what scene they want. So we've got these middle ones. You can also see for each of these beams, there's actually white LED indirect lighting that's reflecting off. And so what that allows is, one, there's a beautiful aesthetic all around these beams themselves, but the other thing that happens is it provides indirect lighting in the room without shining on the screen itself.